Sean Underwood of ShadowDragon, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you being here. What's the trend line that you see in the OSINT community over the next year to maybe even 5 years out? I know it's hard to predict, but what do you see as the things that continue to be important to people or maybe aren't on their radar screens now but should be?
Yeah, thanks for having me today. I think there's a lot of nuances to that question based off of the different diverse mission sets of how OSINT is being applied to government, whether that be, in law enforcement, the military, the intelligence, but even within the federal civilian government, there's a lot of ways that OSINT is now being used. Also, the trends that aren't going to be, completely even because within OSINT, there's sort of two practice areas. There's publicly available information and there's commercially available information. Some of the trends that we've seen today, is very sort of artificial intelligence and machine learning, heavy, where, we're seeing a lot of good outcomes in terms of the different applications of artificial intelligence and its use. But some of the longer term trends that we're seeing is really, how do we actually make open source intelligence a more defined sort of practice area within the government? And a lot of that comes down to training enablement within that structure. You have a lot of areas where OSINT is being applied where it hasn't traditionally been used before. Going back 2-3 years, OSINT was a very manual process. And so as a lot of new vendors are coming out, it's sort of exposing the value of OSINT a lot more within government. And so some of the trends I think we're going to see there is more about how we actually go about training and implementation versus some of just the technology advancements within the tools themselves.
You made a reference to a nuance there that I wanted to pick up on: publicly available information versus commercially available information. Are those two areas diverging? And if so, do you continue to expect them to diverge, or are they consolidating, coming closer together?
Yeah, so within a mission space, they're both used, quite heavily. So the ODNI sort of broke out the definitions of open source intelligence in terms of, what's publicly available information that, you can Google search and get. Commercial available data being more like business records, things that typically are behind a paywall or is collected, and then kind of sold out commercially. And so that's how we kind of break down the two different areas.
Mm-hmm. Are those, is one more so than the other becoming more prominent or more popular in the OSINT community, or is that more art than science, do you think?
There is a little bit of art and science to it as both. A lot of it also comes down to, mission sets and authorities. Within law enforcement operations, a lot of times you aren't allowed to use commercially available information because of privacy concerns. So they may only be able to use publicly available information.
What are the other trends that you see developing regarding things like automation and the tools that organizations use to make decisions with the data that they have, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, kind of looking, 2, 3, 4 years out, based off a lot of discussions that's happening, at the senior command level is, how do we actually bring this to the masses? And part of that is, how do we actually kind of put almost kind of like a Google search type information in place for, open source intelligence? Because to be able to practice it now within different tool sets, going back to what I was saying earlier, the implementation time can be a little complex where, to stand up a tool in an environment, it can be, 4 to 6 months versus 2 to 4 weeks. And so the easier the tools are and being able to simplify the searching, getting results out and applying it to new threat areas as well. I think, kind of looking at the speed is one thing that's going to be looked at going in the future.
Is there a risk of oversimplification of the tools regarding the output that you get from what you ask the tools to do?
I think that depends on the mission and the tool, and also what they're actually, searching. A good example being, if I search a name, there's likely many people that have that name. And so the results that you're going to get back can be, pretty complex. If I'm starting at something like an email address or a telephone number, it has a stronger one-to-one correlation where not a lot of people have ever had that telephone number. So the results that you get back are typically higher confidence related.
Thank you very much for joining me today, Sean. I really appreciate having you here.
Thank you.